Hello, everybody, and welcome to Economics Monday on the IBM TV network. I'm Nick Palavita. We're joined with Peter Bennett from Greenwich, Connecticut, John Power, who's from North Dakota, and Sasha Starr from Canada. And later on this program, we're going to be joined by the Honorable David M. Walker, who's going to join us today, who's the former Comptroller General of the United States, and who just joined us from Utah is Professor Dan Worthington. Good to have you here. And we're going to be discussing the economy in the United States and the economy in general, and of course, what's going on with investing. So I'm going to move it over to Sasha Starr, who has his own input relating to what's going on in the economy today. So Sasha, what's happening with the stock market and what's going on here?
Well, very simple things. By Wednesday, on a last financial show, together with Peter, essentially what I said is that the downturn of the market is coming. It's almost there. So just sell, and sell. It doesn't matter. You can sell 25% of your holding, 50, or even 75. It doesn't matter, because just by this coming Thursday, you will buy it all back anyway, because the market will go down. Another Dow will shed another probably 1,000 points, or maybe a little bit more. But then by Thursday, by Friday, all people will start coming back, because you cannot sit on cash longer than 2, maybe 3 days. You just can't. There is nothing else you can do with cash. What you're going to do with that? Buy rain some rare wines, or some post stamps, or what are you going to do with the cash? Okay, you will enjoy. You will see that, okay, you have hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, in your account. And then what? What can you do with that?
Yeah, well, that was my problem.
And earn 0.75% interest? No, you're not going to do that, because there are high-paying dividend stocks which are paying you 7, 8, and in some cases much more. So obviously, with all that cash, Peter, would you buy more MPLX with your cash?
I did today.
Oh, you did today. Here we go. You didn't even wait until Thursday.
You're killing me, Peter, because the thing is, I looked when he said all this. Okay, I actually did beam out to go review my portfolio because well, gosh, I got to sell some stuff. But all the stuff I bought, exception of maybe 2 stocks, were high quality dividend stocks. Right. I'm going, why do I want to get rid of these dividend stocks when it keeps bringing me cash to go buy more stocks? And so I decided not to do anything, because I'm happy with my dividend stocks. I don't care what the price is. I just care about every, month or quarter I get money coming in, and I like that idea.
Well, it depends on your time frame. I mean, look, if you're investing for life income, like we do on the show for dividend stocks, or if you're investing for options plays that might be a year or 2 and you can roll them over, then you really don't need to make that many changes. Today I sold RTM, which is the material sector, because I had nice profit over the last couple of years, but I'm getting 1.42% on the fund. And I'm looking at it, it's like, the good companies, it's Quality, it's Invesco, it's, they have Sherwin-Williams and a lot of big variety of materials companies. But there's so many issues now. I guess the 2 that's jumping out is the tax bill. There's a lot of uncertainty there. I mean, they may actually do this. And as an example, the Manchin was saying that, maybe he'll accept a 25% corporate rate, which isn't. But yet Barron says if it was 25.5%, it'll eat up all of next year's profits. So, on the one side, Sash is right. Where are you going to put your cash?
Right.
And not everything in the stock market is a high-paying dividend stocks, or is it an options play? So if you look at the rest of it, like an RTM 1.42%, it's like, I'm not going to depend on that going up for the next few years when the economy may be running into trouble. Plus, I really think there's an opportunity and also a risk for the rest of the market in the energy sector.
Peter, you just mentioned the name of Joe Manchin. I'm not an American, as you know, and I can't figure out any other country in the world where one person could hold hostages, both Republicans and Democrats. Where else it's ever happened?
I don't know. You'd have to look at history. There must have been close parliamentary votes, over time and things around the world. But the U.S. obviously is in the news, and it's up front. So, but it's a tight electorate. It's a tight situation politically. Maybe it's not just Manchin. Maybe Sinema or one of the other reps might have a brain, because somebody on the Democrat side sure is crazy. I mean, they have some good ideas, but their execution is terrible, and their understanding of the economy is terrible. I mean, they do have good ideas, or you could argue for them. I mean, I'm not a strict Republican in any way, because, look, I am concerned about global warming. I think there's risk there, but you have to do it in the right way. But they're just have the philosophy: spend money, throw money at any problem, and it goes away.
Right.
Look at U.S. education; it's not working.
Right. Yeah. Well, and we went over that with the other day, that if somebody just throws money at somebody, it doesn't mean they're going to invest wisely, because the money didn't come with an instruction book.
Yeah.
In other words, Peter, you give them $2,000, which they did. They're just going to spend it. They didn't put it in the stock market, because they were never trained to put it in the stock market. You know what I mean? They were never trained to invest.
They needed to eat.
And so it's, pardon? What
they needed to eat. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, they need it to eat, and that's the problem. But at the same time, this goes back to The Millionaire Next Door and the book The Richer Than a Millionaire, that living below your means can make a difference. In other words, in putting something away for savings. But people they're not going to do that, and they're not trained to do that, so they tend to consume it, and then off it goes. It's not. We have a big educational problem when it comes to financial literacy in the U.S. Yeah.
Nick, I think actually it's a blessing that they didn't learn to put their money in a bank earning 0.5% interest.
Okay. Let's go to the bank.
From that.
Okay, let's go to the bank. So I sit on the board, my homeowners board. We have about $1 million budget, and we had about $250,000 that just got released from the CD rates. We had to re-up the CD, and you know what we got? 0.6%. We didn't even get 1%. 0.6%. And I'm sitting there cringing, Peter, because I'm going, I would take the $250,000 and put it with MPLX and get 10%. But here's the problem when you're sitting on the board. It may be a breach of fiduciary duty to reach out and grab that 9% dividend from MPLX. But if it was my money, that $250,000 is going to MPLX, not 0.6% with a bank. And unfortunately, this happens all the time. Even in our pension industry, we're forced to put it in these fixed equity index annuities that now give about 2.3%.
A very quick question, Nick, for you and your board.
Yes.
Let's see in next year or two, the interest rates will turn negative, and instead of making 0.6%, you will be paying 0.6%. What are you going to do there?
I don't know. Nobody on our I believe nobody on our board has any financial background whatsoever. But my belief is, if you took the $250,000 and it would take a while for me to say, well, why don't we put it in a diversified portfolio of dividend stocks, which I'm a big believer in, that we would make a lot more money on our money than we would going into 0.6%, which is what we did in the bank as it sits there, because we have to build what they call reserves in all homeowners associations to pay for future liabilities, such as you have to fix the roof, you have to paint the place, you have to redo the roads. So we're sitting on about $800,000 in reserves to pay for all this stuff, giving a whopping interest averaging about 1%, because we have some paper at 2.3. But nobody ever takes a look at it seriously, saying, and let's say I did say, hey, let's put an MPLX and do that, and the market goes down, I'm just going to get a bunch of flack. Why'd you do that?
I was just saying, the number one thing that was repeated in MBA school more than anything else is the risk-reward curve. You move up. CDs are basically riskless, and you don't get sued by the homeowners because you lost money.
Right.
So what? It's not the place where you're going to be investing for more. Although I could tell you, if you want to call me how to get a higher rate on CDs. But
higher rate than 0.6.
Yeah, there
I
are
think
higher
so.
rates.
Yeah, I can.
There are higher rates than 0.6.
Far,
Well,
Yeah,
far
I'll
better.
talk to you off the record then.
Yeah, I
you
like
know,
to do
because
that.
because that's what we ended up doing, and I'm going.
Yeah, I think we get you like
Okay,
one or maybe.
one
Depends on your
should have
contract.
Yeah,
Depends on your
there one's
contract.
available.
0.6.
Anyway, I mean, look, there's a risk reward ratio, and that's why you're not
Yeah,
people.
but here's
Where are people going to put their money in the long run?
Okay.
But even more importantly, everybody's missing the big picture, which is I've always repeated on this show on Investing with Sasha, Modern Investing with Sasha on Wednesdays, that the U.S. has unfunded liabilities for healthcare of 100 to 200 trillion. And the rest of the countries in the world also have unfunded liabilities because they promised free healthcare for aging demographics. And even this week, I was going to mention this maybe on Modern Investing with Sasha, that the Social Security just came out and said, and it's a small amount compared to the medical bills for the world, but and also pensions around the world that are woefully underfunded, even the pension systems and the healthcare systems. But the Social Security just announced now we're heading, because of COVID, for a default in 2033 instead of 2034. So the date of running out of money is coming quicker, which means that it's 25. They're going to be 25% short just in 2034 and 2033, and everybody's like, don't spend $4 trillion. Do spend $4 trillion. I mean, you don't want to waste $4 trillion, but we're talking about numbers in the very likely hundreds of trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities and it's coming due, and nobody's done anything. People have known about this for 30 years. It's not politically acceptable to fix it.
Yeah. Well, I have a good story on pensions, since you brought it up. Okay, we do these fully insured pensions, which are all guaranteed by insurance companies, so we never lose money, and we've never had a pension benefit guarantee corporation claim because you're reinsured by the PBGC until maybe this month. And I say maybe because the PBGC is doing this. You'll love this. Only the government can think of this. So we terminated a plan back in 2017, distributed the assets. The PBGC jumped up and said, no, it's not a fully insured plan. We believe it was administered as a traditional plan, which it wasn't, but that's their caca belief. Okay. So we're going to make it a traditional plan, and your plan is now underfunded. Now, how could that be? It's because we when you terminate a pension plan, you give them the cash surrender value of the life and the annuity contract. When you terminate a traditional plan, you give them based on the income for the rest of their lives. It's a different calculation. Well, that makes our plan underfunded $800,000. Okay, who's going to pay for it? The company that I work with already went through bankruptcy. It's toast. Okay, which means the taxpayers are going to pay $800,000.
Oh yeah,
and it's a made-up thing. And I'm sitting there going like, okay, so I thought, well, we could fight it in court, but I don't know if my client has any incentive to fight it. They're going to pay out additional $800,000. Why would we want to fight that? I don't know. But if we did, I'd have to advise them we're going to lose. Why would we lose?
But you know what? You're raising a bigger issue than that.
Okay, but here
PBGC.
The PBGC
is another.
They're already $60 billion underfunded.
Right.
They've already been bailed out. Okay.
It's just part of this aging demographic and
I know, but this is also part of part of the stupidity of what's going on in Washington, D.C. And I can't fight them because there's a doctrine that all lawyers know called the Chevron doctrine. If there's a reasonable interpretation in the code, and there is one, our interpretation and theirs, you give deference. It's called Chevron deference to the government.
Yep.
So the government automatically wins this case. So I'm going like, okay, you won the case, and now it's going to cost you $800,000. What am I supposed to do? I'm sitting here going like, man, are you kidding me? And frankly,
and nobody will even consider the fact that they're losing money this way.
They don't. It's almost like they don't care. They're out to lunch when it comes to the expenditures. So I'm just sitting there going, fine.
But this gets back to the market though, because as returns go to the market, reduced in the market in the future, and I've been saying it for a long time. If you look at just the 40-year trend line in interest rates, it hits zero in about 7 or 8 years. So that means the market will probably do well for for those years because people are getting more and more desperate. Oh, I'll take 1%. I'll take anything, compared to zero or heading towards zero. But then what happens when we're in 7 years from now? We have an aging population. These pensions also can't get any returns maybe after that because we're at zero or negative interest rates and the market returns have already been, made. And now the market might gradually go up, but you're not, you're going to have, it won't be, as strong like now. So now another problem, the government's now on the line for these pensions. Look, it was always going to be tough if you look at the big picture for a society to have 1/3 or 20%, 25, whatever, depending on your measure, of the people retired. I mean, that's a lot of people who are retiring, and we built a system where we're going to say, oh, the government's going to take care of you for the rest of your life, and so have other countries. It's not, probably.
And people are living longer, which is another problem.
So we'll probably have a stagflation where, this is more and more where I'm thinking, where we'll have some inflation, and that'll be the only way the governments can pay off any of their debt or manage it. So you'll have very low interest rates, low returns, and higher inflation. Even 3% a year cumulatively starts eating away at retirees, benefits.
Yeah, they should have started adjusting the retirement age long time before they did.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they have to make drastic, unpolitical choices. In other words, they have to do math, and the people in government are not math oriented. They're more toward making everybody happy oriented. And some of them are bad choices, like what you say, John. The normal retirement age has to be moved up way into the 70s if you want Social Security to be solvent. The cap has to be lifted. You can't give wealthy people the breaks anymore that they have to pay into the tax system. I'm sorry, it's not a free lunch. And so they got to lift the cap. And here's the other problem, John, I found. When I told my employees this, lifting the cap, they go, what do you mean lift the cap? I said, once you're over 137,900, you don't pay into Social Security anymore. Oh, I didn't know that. Then I just realized why they didn't know it. My employees never made more than 137,900. Right. They never made the type of money to recognize that, the cap is lifted, so I don't have to pay taxes anymore. And so the real problem you have is a group of uneducated people about how the Social Security system works, because most of them are employees making less than 137,900 and don't realize once you make over it, the cap is lifted. And I remember I used to get a tax break. I was going, oh, great, I've already paid into my Social Security. And my accountant would be going, okay, you're already taking care of Social Security. So all the other money gets to go to you without having to pay Social Security taxes. And my employees never knew that. And I was
but it wouldn't be a major concern to them in their defense, Nick. I mean, look, they're making what they can make. I know that. Politicians know this, and they should raise the cap. But again, this is dropping the bucket.
Or even lift the cap, Peter. I mean, the thing is,
no, they should lift the cap to unlimited, probably.
Unlimited, sure, because you got. I've had clients that are making $4 million a year. I have one client making $1 million a week, and the thing is, a lot of it they're not paying Social Security taxes because of the cap. And can they afford paying more?
No, they could. Absolutely. They should raise the cap, but it would be a drop in the bucket compared to hundreds of trillions of dollars. Correct. But they should. That would. I don't know why that. This is one of the areas where the Republicans are wrong, and there is a list, even though the list on the Democrat side is so much longer. They should raise a cap. Why wouldn't they? They need to raise as much funds as possible. They'll figure some of this stuff out eventually.
Hopefully.
The government wants to act in a crisis.
Peter, even the estate tax system. I used to do estate planning with people because there was a federal estate tax once you reached over $1.2 million. Well, they eliminated in 2010 completely, and that's part of the reason I just jumped out. I was going, I can't be an advisor to a tax that doesn't exist. But my working in that area, John, go think of that one. Okay, I'm a tax advisor to a tax that doesn't exist. That's going to be really.
I know. That was one of the very few things that Trump did that I totally opposed.
But then they pushed up the unified credit so much that unless you had more than 23 million. You don't have to pay it. Why?
we're protecting dynasties, and then the rationale was we're helping small businesses and farmers. But anybody who knew the code knew that there was already an exception for small
2032
businesses and
Cap A.
farmers. So it's like they could have just raised that, maybe, which would have been a loophole in a sense, because somebody could buy a farmer a small business.
Well,
but why get rid of these state taxes?
The arguments. Okay, since I worked in there for 17 years, the arguments against it was if the government got a hold of the money, they're just going to squander it anyway. And by the way, that is a valid argument.
But they need money.
But they do need money. If there was a way you could earmark it just to pay down the national debt, okay, then I believe even my client, I know that it's not going to happen, John, but my clients would be they would be less reluctant to pay the tax if they earmarked it just to pay down the national debt. But instead, it's earmarked to go to Bernie Sanders, who spends it on anything he wants, or AOC. And they're not going to go for that, because they don't go for that that attitude that exists in a certain wing of the Democratic Party, which is everything's free, and it's not free. Somebody's going to be paying for it. So I think that's where if it was financial responsibility, and the thing is, they earmark these funds to pay things down like the national debt or enhance Social Security, you'd get less resistance from my clients. If you said, hey, it's a free-for-all for the Democratic Party to give free lunches, free everything, free anything, then I think you're going to have a lot of resistance. And that's the problem.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be resistance, really. It should be what makes sense. On
both sides. Unfortunately, Peter,
to me, it's like most people. Look, a lot of people inherit money, and it doesn't help them. Money can. Everybody thinks, oh, more money. Leave my kids a fortune. But the wealthy, a lot of them are smart enough to say, I'm not going to give my kid that much money, because then you face the issue of what are you going to do with your life? I'm close to retirement, and I face that issue. It's like, okay, I have a part-time business. I do the investing and stuff, but it's like, if when I was younger, it'd be like, okay, I got to get a job. I'm going to meet people. I'm going to learn. I'm going to, then. And my brother says this a lot. He says he has a lot of wealthy friends who retire and they say they're going to go back to work, but they never do. So then what do you, and these kids, some of them, they inherit the money. They don't have a purpose in life. Work is very good for people. It's very, it's productive. It gives people a purpose. And so, I think they, but again, these are drops in the bucket compared to the mistakes the Democrats are making, one, and also drops in the bucket compared to the debt on both sides that both sides have allowed to happen. And so it's all evolving like the long-term trends. In other words, rates keep going down, and they can make, this, crisis or this $3 trillion they're going to spend, and it's going to do everything. But in the long run, it's the demographics that's going to drive everything. Demographics is destiny, they say.
Yeah. Is that $3 trillion bill? Is that going to go through?
Everybody's 4.5 trillion bill, you mean, or 5 trillion bill?
4.5.
No, I'm joking. Or $1 trillion bill. They're all.
Well, I think the $1 trillion bill already went through. So
they kind of agreed on that, but then it never did, I think, pass because.
Right. The House will vote on it the 27th, supposedly.
Yeah,
really, that's the $1 trillion.
Other people want the $4 trillion bill, so it's like. What's a trillion here or there?
What's a trillion here or there? It's the entire economy of Canada.
Among friends.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, it's pretty huge. So John, the thing is, the $1 trillion they're voting on coming up this month.
That the agreement that the Democrats came to when they passed the budget resolution was that they would vote on the infrastructure bill by the 27th.
Okay.
Whether that happens or not, who knows?
Right. My excuse, I was out of the country for the month, and I was trying to get the U.S. news, and there was no news in Italy except in Italian. And they didn't report a lot on the U.S. They didn't really care. It's what's going on in the European Union and Italy. And then the thing is, so the only way I could get U.S. news, I had to watch IBM TV on my cell phone. So I had to watch you guys to figure out what was going on because there was no U.S. news I could get in English over in Italy. It was really a pain. They did have English programming. You'll love this. Little House on the Prairie, okay, Dukes of Hazzard, and NCIS 20 years ago. Those were the shows that we watched. I am not kidding, because I could watch shows in English, and those were the shows that showed up. In terms of CNN, no. Fox, no. Watching anything in the United States, forget it. It was like next to impossible. So I really wasn't sure what was going on over here. And the New York Times, I could only get in the Marriott. Once I got to my apartment, no New York Times sold anywhere in the city. I mean, so you were like cut off for what's really going on in the United States. It was really challenging. So they're going to vote for the infrastructure bill this month, $1 trillion.
Supposedly.
I thought they had another bill that was like $3.5 trillion.
That's the big budget bill. Yeah.
Okay.
The tax bill.
So I got a couple of them going through the system right now.
Right.
And see,
the Democrats, the House Democrats, the progressive side of the Democrat Party said they wouldn't allow them to go through. They wanted to vote for both at the same time. There was a lot of bipartisan support for the infrastructure bill, and some of the more moderate Democrats were in favor of voting for that separately, but the progressive side said no, because they know if the infrastructure bill passes, then a lot of the support for the budget reconciliation goes away, and it won't pass. So they're kind of holding it hostage, the two together.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, the thing is, to me, it's important because if they spend more money, the money will eventually float into the stock market, and the stock market will continue going up. If they don't spend money, then I got to reassess what I'm doing. Although I do like the dividend stocks, Sasha. You know,
unless it stokes fear of inflation, in which case the market could go down. It's not quite that simple because
but what,
a lot of people are afraid of inflation now.
Yeah, well, what are you supposed to do with Walgreens Boots Alliance? They pay a good dividend and they hold real estate. I mean, you know, real estate for inflation, dividend, money in your pocket. Should I dump it? That was the one I was considering selling, Sasha. I was going like,
I didn't sell that one.
Yeah,
I sold some of my position in Enbridge. It's a Canadian oil and gas
but
company.
Enbridge plays a good dividend, so I would.
They pay good dividend. It's not as good as when I bought it, so it's kind of went down a little bit. But I figured out, okay, let's see if I have 10,000 shares and I sell 5. I still retain 5,000 shares, and the other 5 in the right market condition, I always can buy back. So first of all, I check that it's ex-dividend, so I'm not losing any dividends on the stocks that I sold. Then I'll wait maybe in 2 months, or maybe even by Thursday. Maybe I'll buy it back.
Okay. All right. I was curious. We're joined by the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. Thanks for coming this week. I know you're not going to be here next week, but since I've been gone in Europe, I have not got to report what's going on in the United States. It was very challenging to get information. Once I left the Marriott and went to my apartment, the only TV I got in the U.S. that was in English was Dukes of Hazzard, Little House on the Prairie, and of course NCIS 20 years ago. Everything else in the U.S., CNN, no Fox, no New York Times, no anything. So what's going on here, David, in the U.S. in terms of our spending bills in Washington, D.C.? Are we planning to spend money like a drunken sailor? Honestly, I did spend money like a drunken sailor in Italy. I had a great time. But are they doing it over here too?
Well, let's just don't insult drunken sailors, okay?
No.
Somebody who was a professor at the Naval Academy. Let me tell you what's going on. There's a showdown occurring with regard to the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which has a price tag of about $1.2 trillion. It's got the support of over 60 senators, the president, and Speaker Pelosi reluctantly promised that she would bring it to a vote by September 27th, but she has not been whipping votes. And there's a real showdown coming as to whether or not that vote will occur by the 27th and whether or not that legislation will pass. Clearly, a significant majority of Americans want it to pass. I think it needs to pass because it's bipartisan. We need investments in infrastructure. While I believe it ought to be paid for, I do believe that it's needed. That contrasted with the budget reconciliation bill, which includes, depending upon who you ask what the price tag is, anywhere from 3.5 trillion. And by the way, these numbers are over 10 years, 3.5 trillion to 5.1 trillion in spending that would increase the size of government. B, increase mandatory spending. C, increase dependency on government, and very much complicate our longer term situation. So we've got the Senate has got, at least 2 senators, maybe more on the Democratic side, that have said that they're not for the $3.5 trillion bill, which would mean that it's dead. But in addition to that, we have the debt ceiling, which was suspended up until the end of July. Something's got to be done with that by sometime in October for us not to default, which obviously is not something we want to do. The fiscal year ends on September 30, so something's got to be done in order to pass a continuing resolution, because we're obviously not going to pass all the appropriations bills by the beginning of the fiscal year, because we haven't even passed a budget resolution. Haven't even passed a budget reconciliation bill yet. So, bottom line, it's a mess.
Okay, so I'm glad I came back into the mess. It was interesting also overseas in Italy, we had 80% vaccination for the general public, required to have what they call a green pass to get in. And of course, in the United States, we don't have green passes. So I had to show my CDC card on the internet on my cell phone, and they accepted it. There's no rules on how they accept things or don't accept things in Italy. They just look at it real strange and they go, well, it's on the cell phone, so it must be legitimate. David, I don't know. But in order to get around, you also had to wear masks. They took COVID very seriously over in Italy. But what about the United States? Are we taking this very seriously, or we just really are shrugging our shoulders when it comes to COVID-19?
Well, the government is trying to very much get us to take it seriously, and I think most Americans do take it seriously. It's interesting. I just got off a telephone call with somebody who was telling me that the tests that the government is using to try to be able to detect COVID-19 were not designed for that purpose, and were also advising me not to take the booster shot. I personally have had the Pfizer shot. I think the positives outweigh the negatives. And I would encourage people to get the shot. People who have had the shots in most places don't have to wear masks. People who haven't had the shot have to wear masks. I'm going on a cruise, believe it or not, on Sunday, and I have to have a test 72 hours in advance to send to Bermuda. They're then going to take a test before I get on the ship.
Right.
And then I think I have to take another test when I get off in Bermuda. And in all circumstances, I have to have proof of having both COVID vaccines, dose 1 and dose 2. So I think for the most part, we're taking seriously, although we're getting mixed signals from the government. There are controversies about whether or not the government has certain authorities to mandate certain things versus not.
David, you just said something that quickly, but it was very interesting. You said somebody was advising you not to take the booster shot. Can you tell me the rationale they were explaining to you?
That I don't need it because I'm in very good health, and that in fact this person has a lot of contacts with the medical community. This person hasn't even taken the first 2 shots, which I did. Okay. But he said that, it's really not needed unless you have serious underlying health conditions. That was his position.
I saw an interesting article this week about they're developing oral vaccines, several companies. So that should be interesting when they have a pill you could take instead of a shot. That could be a lot more popular. The other thing that I think is interesting is the more I see it as the solution should have been to not vaccinate everybody, but to create enough centers to cure it. And, now they're doing the antibody centers in Florida. There's something with an I, I forgot what it was, but in Africa, they're administrating a drug that helps prevent any problems once you get it. And there was the drugs that Trump mentioned and that everybody was against because, who didn't like Trump. But it turned out that hydrochloroquine. It turns out I've seen a lot of doctors and evidence that hydrochloroquine worked. So maybe, and also now it turns out that the people who have had it are one study just showed 27 times more immune than people who got a shot. So maybe the answer was let people get it and just cure it. Maybe. I mean, it's a complicated issue.
Well, a lot of times you don't know whether you had it or not. I mean, for example, I had both shots, and I had a mild summer cold, and so did my wife. And we rarely, get summer colds. And summer colds are, allegedly, typically how, what you would get if you get a mild case of COVID. So, I mean, who knows? Let's just say that we haven't had clear and consistent guidance from our government, and too much of the media and too much of government is trying to draw fear into Americans. And it's exact opposite of what FDR said when he said that we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, David, that brings us to another point. On World Edition, we were discussing earlier today about lack of leadership in Washington, or at least at the federal government level. And are we having a leadership deficit in the United States? Because as I was looking for potential candidates for president, which is going to be in the next couple of years, as I go to one party, I see an obvious choice, which is this guy here, who's been around before. But on the Democratic Party, assuming Joe Biden, he's 78 years old, he's going to be 82. I mean, unfortunately, age works against you in terms of making decisions. Who in the Democratic Party are they going to bring as a nominee? And who in the Republican Party, if Donald Trump decides, well, I'm just not going to do it because who knows what he's going to decide, who is going to step up to the plate and become nominees? I just don't see a lot of really good, strong leadership in Washington, D.C. And since you're in the city, maybe you know one or two people that actually are competent.
Well, there are people who are competent, but I can generally tell you that the people who make the best presidents are people who typically have been governors before,
Right.
Who have been a chief executive of a large and complex governmental entity. Now, there are senators who have been governor before, and on both sides of the aisle. Frankly, I expect that it's more likely than not that the nominees next time are going to be current or former governors. And the biggest deficit that the country has, in my view, and it has been this way for a while, is a leadership deficit. I mean, we have a number of large and growing challenges, and we're not addressing them. And we're living for today rather than trying to take steps to help create a better tomorrow. Personally, I do not want Donald Trump to run. I think he is a very divisive figure. While I liked his policies a lot more than the policies that we're seeing right now, I didn't like his personality at all. And I think that, quite frankly, if he did run, that would hurt the chances of the Republicans being able to win. I do not expect Joe Biden to run because I think he's having enough challenges as it is. I think there's virtually zero chance that Kamala Harris would ever win because she's not likable, and she's was the most liberal senator when she was in office, and the two things that she's been given to do, she's been a dismal failure at. So, and you don't even hear from her anymore. And I think part of the reason you don't hear from her more is because her ratings are so negative. So, and while you were gone, you talked about the fiscal issue. I mean, Afghanistan's obviously been a disaster. My personal view is General Milley ought to resign.
Yeah.
For three reasons. Number one, the botched Afghanistan situation. Number two, what he did with China back in the latter part of the Trump presidency. And number three, this botched, hit on civilians, that we're finding out that rather than getting ISIS-K terrorists, we got 10 people, seven of which were children who had nothing to do with terrorism. the border is an absolute total disaster.
Oh yeah.
Now we're flying people back to Haiti. I mean, frankly, we should have been doing that a long time ago. The inflation is getting to be a concern. We've talked a little bit about COVID, and the president wants everybody to get revaccinated, but he got ahead of the science. And I don't know. We're just in very challenging times right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go on, Peter.
I was going to say, you know what? I called Bill Clinton really early when he became president, like when he was just like beginning to run. I said, perfect at the time, Southern governor. You know who I'm hoping I would vote for Trump, because of his policies, but his personality, I agree with you, David. It's like, he's just too gruff. He used to be happy on TV and stuff, or happier, but now he's just like, he's too serious. He's always so mean looking, and he doesn't control his language enough. But who I think is going to be our next president is Ron DeSantis. Because he follows most or all of Trump's policies, but he's so well spoken, and he's a friendlier guy. He's a more likable guy, and I think the Democrats have put themselves in a huge hole. I think they're going to get slaughtered in 22. I mean, a lot of Democrats are saying they're not going to run again. I think, I forgot what the count was, at least 8 were saying, I'm not going to run again, because they don't want to run, because if they're a lame duck, if they're a minority, they have no power anyway. So it's like, you know what, I'm going to go back to private life. So in 22, as midterms usually go, they're going to get killed, plus Biden's unpopularity grows by the day. But in 24, I'm hoping Trump doesn't run and he defers to DeSantis. He should be the leader of the party, but DeSantis is, just such a great leader. And the antibody centers I just mentioned are an example. In Florida, they have antibody centers now. In the other states, I don't even think they're doing it yet. We're not much.
No, you're right.
I would agree that DeSantis is a leading candidate and has got a good shot. Believe me, if Trump doesn't run, there'll be a lot of people who will run.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You're right.
Governors, as well as some senators, some of which may have been ex-governors. But I think as of today, he is a leading candidate, if not the leading candidate. But
yeah, there was an initial straw. There was a straw poll at a conservative meeting, and you're right, it was leading because he actually beat Trump in one poll, but then he lost later. But his name comes up. He's in the lead for sure, as you said.
Yeah.
Depends on what Trump does.
It's over 3 years away, which is a lifetime in politics.
That's true. Good point.
The Democrats are doing everything they can to smear Santos right now. I'm DeSantis.
Of course.
I mean, it's a game. I think Trump has become ineffectual for the reasons that have been stated, and it would be a mistake for him to run again. Because everybody sees him as sour and bitter, and is sour and bitter. Does he deserve to be sour and bitter? Well, probably. The fact that he looks mad all the time is because the country's being ruined by Biden, so I understand that. But he's better off leading from behind a very strong, likable candidate who is pretty consistent with his policies rather than try to run himself because of his divisiveness. So I'm agreeing with you guys. I think DeSantis is the strongest candidate. I mean, I look at all the senators who have, most of those guys have prostrated themselves in one way or another. Or is it prostituted? I don't remember. But they've got problems politically, I think. I'm thinking Romney. My gosh, look at that character. And he used to be the presidential candidate. So I hope we see an emerging strong Republican candidate, and they don't shoot themselves in the foot, or the Democrats don't stab them enough times to maim them. But like you said, there's a lot of time left. We'll see what happens, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about Greg Abbott?
I love, this is my favorite point, about how the media is just so corrupt in the U.S. Look at history. They made Reagan out to be like a lazy napper and not bright, and the guy was a genius. I mean, if
Incredible.
you read his writings, he was the one who came up with the ideas that brought down the Berlin Wall, of stressing the Russian economy. I mean, the guy's brilliant. Then they said Ford is a klutz, right? The guy was a football player, note, but he was a klutz because he bumped his head once or twice, and then, so they paint they'll say anything, basically, most of the US media. And as an aside, you mentioned the CNN and Europe. So when they look at what Europe thinks of us, it's like the Europeans may not realize, if you're in Europe, it's like you're getting your news from the most biased sources in the world. CNN and the Times are totally in the tank. They won't report anything on, they barely report anything that could possibly disagree with the narrative that, Democrats are good, Orange man bad, or Republicans bad. So it's so corrupt. And that's one of the problems the U.S. has, and why we're so divided, because, I mean, Fox is biased to a point too, but, when you have people who just consume liberal media, and then they're like, I know what I'm talking about, when they know absolutely nothing.
And then it's complicated by social media. And let me give you an example that's close to home. I live in Alexandria, Virginia. We have a big governor's race coming up this year. And the Democrat is not an incumbent, but he's a former governor, Terry McAuliffe, who was a big friend of the Clintons. And we have a businessman who was co-CEO of the Carlyle Group, which is a private equity firm out of Washington, D.C., Glenn Youngkin, who's running. And if you look at the ads that are being run by the Democratic candidate McAuliffe, Trump, 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 trying to tie this guy to Trump, and all negative, really, really disappointing. I mean, so it's not just at the federal level. I mean, he's having an impact at every level.
Yeah, and it's not about the issues either.
Right, exactly what I was going to say, Nick.
Yeah.
Exactly, Nick. It's not about the issues. It's like, we don't need to discuss solving anything. We don't like Orange Man. It's like, it's all they've got.
So we like Orange Man, we don't like Orange Man. That's the narrative. Right. But there's no issues that are discussed. It's almost like Nick Saban. If you ever saw Nick Saban on Alabama, he has no personality whatsoever. But admittedly, he is the best coach in college football today. So sometimes, unfortunately, the best people out there, they may not have much of a personality for politics. And it's very unfortunate, because they could make the best politicians. It's just, instead, that's not how we do the decisions.
Well, but Nick Saban is a great straight man for the Duck, for Affleck. I have to say. Great straight man for the Duck.
Right.
Oh, yeah, he does good. But I'm a big Alabama and Saban fan. But look at it. There's three issues, all right? If you think about candidates: personality, leadership ability, and policies. To me, if you look at Trump, terrible on number one, good on number two, and good on number three.
Yep.
Look at Biden, okay on number one, terrible on number two, and terrible on number three.
Right.
I mean, it'd be nice to get somebody who can check all three boxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't think Biden's going to run, because
no. I don't think he'll run. I think he's got enough cognitive problems right now. He's underwater on every major issue, including COVID-19,
right,
which was his signature issue, even though the vaccine he had nothing to do with. Yeah. But he's underwater. I think I don't see him running.
So if DeSantis or Abbott run from the Republican side, who is in the talent pool for the Democratic side? Who are they going to pull?
They'll find somebody. It could be Higginluber. I always thought he was elected.
I think when David said they're going to look for a governor, they'll probably go to Gavin, Newsom, and Kelly.
No.
That'll be the ultimate stretch between DeSantis and Gavin Newsom, because remember, he won that recall. He slaughtered
only in California and maybe New York.
California, New York are big electoral.
Well, I don't want to mention any names, but I think if you look at Democrats who are current or former governors,
mm-hmm.
and and there are a number. And then if you look at some who are in the Senate that are former governors, those should be your best candidates. But that doesn't
I actually have heard that it's usually former governors, but not senators often, because senators have voting records. So it's pretty easy to nail somebody, even if they voted for the right thing. You can say, oh, they voted for it for the wrong reason. Governors don't have those kind of records. So a lot of times governors make good candidates because they have executive ability, but not a voting record where you could say, oh, they voted on this bill. And sometimes they did the right thing. Again, it can be very misleading. They might have done, voted against a good bill for the right reasons, but you can't taint a governor quite that way. It's much harder. That's why they'll have trouble nailing DeSantis, by the way, because he doesn't have that voting record and he has an excellent execution record. So I think he's a guy. I'm a big fan of his.
It's going to be DeSantis versus Newsom. Watch, because
it won't be Newsom.
That is a polarized. Well, he just got a big push out of California. That thing backfired. That recall backfired.
But look how much money he spent, and look at what they had to do in bringing all their top people in order to get that done.
And you know what? He succeeded largely by running against Trump, and that was his campaign theme. Don't vote for Trump. But if it's not Trump on the Republican side running, now if it's Trump, he'll have anybody can use that, obviously. But if it's not Trump, then they won't be able to bring Trump up forever. In other words, they built this story up about Trump, who's really a nice guy. But he's not the most tactful person for sure. And, he sometimes comes across, especially lately, as gruff. And I agree with Dan. Maybe he has good reason. I mean, he feels the election was stolen. And I've seen some pretty good arguments to say that it might have been stolen. So,
the Arizona results are supposed to come out this week. And there's no question in my mind that there were a lot of election irregularities. My personal view is it's unlikely that they were enough to change the result. Because they would have to be significant in about 5 states or so in order to change the result. But there's no question that there were irregularities, and I can understand why you'd be upset. But even look at the California race, the recall race. Newsom tried to tie Elder to Trump. It was all about Trump, and it wasn't what it wasn't about, which it should have been about, was Newsom's record. He's been terrible.
He sucks. Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah, but that's not how politics. Unfortunately, that's not how politics don't look at metrics. They just look at the stuff that goes out there, and that's how we elect people. It's just really strange.
It is having had in a temporary in a moment of temporary insanity, having run for office. It is not a merit and integrity based endeavor.
Right. Yeah. But see, David, though, doesn't it really, because of that, detract from the best and the brightest? Because when I was looking through the candidates, I'm going, these people aren't great leaders. They're the best and the brightest aren't there, and they tend to go away from politics, not towards politics.
Yes.
And so don't we have a leadership vacuum because of the nature of how politics are done in the United States?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we may see.
I wouldn't recommend it.
We may see Barack Obama run again through Michelle. That would give him a 4th term. I mean, he's running things now.
I doubt that's going to happen.
Well,
she doesn't want to get involved in politics.
No, I think she's smart enough to go, no, I'm not going to do this.
No, I think that's true. Unless they get desperate enough.
Right. Yeah.
No matter what you think about Obama, the fact is he was one of the least qualified people to be elected president.
Clearly.
And no matter what you think about Michelle, she's less qualified. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But David, you were managing to actually be Comptroller General through different administrations. How were you able to do that in such a? I don't know how you did that.
First, it's important to understand how the position works. Okay.
Right.
It is a 15-year term. The longest of any appointed position in government. You can only be removed by impeachment or joint resolution of Congress signed by the president for specified reasons, which I can assure you those would not occur in my case. All right. And what's more significant is not that I was able to keep the job during that period of time, because the way the appointment was, you keep it unless you violate those provisions. What's more significant is I was a Reagan presidential appointee, a Bush presidential appointee, and a Clinton presidential appointee.
Oh, yeah.
And the appointment process for the Comptroller General, in my opinion, is the most complex of any position in government. Now, why do I say that? Because it starts with a bicameral and bipartisan commission in Congress, 10 leaders of the House and the Senate. They, by law, have to come up with at least 3 candidates, can be more, no less than 3. They then send a list to the President of the United States. The President then has to nominate, and then the Senate has to confirm. And as a result, so you generally want somebody who's qualified, who's not partisan, who both parties have confidence in, who's not an ideologue. But, that is, there are a lot of hoops you have to get through in order to get the job, which is why they want to give you job security once you have the job, because by definition, you're calling balls and strikes, you're telling the truth, you're making tough choices, and a lot of people don't like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I found that everybody says they're for transparency and accountability until it relates to them.
Exactly. That's true. Yeah, they don't want transparency, because imagine if the government did accounting like business does and actually had to fund account for these unfunded liabilities. It's like, oops, everybody's owes millions of dollars in the United States and everybody in the world.
And
we don't want to admit that.
Let's talk about that for a second, okay? If you look at the audited financial statements of the United States government for the year ended September 30, 2020, which are the latest financial statements, you'll find that we were in the total liabilities and unfunded promises for the United States federal government was about $104 trillion. All right.
There you go.
Let's translate that. Okay. That's $315,000 per person. That's $720,000 per income tax filer. And that's $1,300,000 per income tax payer. All right. And median household income was $67,500. So it's like 20 times total median household income. And that was before the impact of COVID-19.
And they may be underestimating the underfunded liabilities, because, as I've said, they owe 100 trillion to 200 trillion unfunded. Maybe it's 200 trillion, but whatever it is, everybody owes $1 million. That's what I said. It's like, that's going to come to roost, and it's already coming to roost in the form of 40 years of declining interest rates, and that's why we're probably going to zero, because when the government has to print all this money, they're not going to want to pay interest rate on it too, and have that compound even further. Rather, they're going to want it to inflate it a bit, so they'll allow inflation to go higher than their treasury rates, and so it's going to be a tough environment.
And that's why the Federal Reserve is so important, and they've, I think, to a great extent, lost their independence. They've aided and abetting some things that have caused us to be where we are. And that's why the modern monetary theory is so dangerous.
Oh, yeah. It's a crazy theory. It's like you could just print money. Did you ever play Monopoly, where you say, okay, everybody gets $500 every time they go past go? It does affect things. For instance, real estate in Monopoly, when you play that way. Well, what's happening in real estate these days? It's going through the roof. Why? Because interest rates are low. Energy probably affected food. Certain things it's going to come out somewhere. So it's important to plan for that. If you're an individual.
We have a little problem right now.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're out of time. We do want to thank the Honorable David M. Walker for showing up to Economics Monday. He won't be here next week. Enjoy your trip, David. I guess you're going to be on a trip. And hopefully we'll see everybody the next week after. See you next week on Economics Monday. All right, we'll see you. Bye.